The New York Rangers have Adam Fox paired with Urho Vaakanainen. Why?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1394 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Rangers last night, they lose another preseason game to the Devils, this time by a score of 3-1. Another somewhat lackluster third period, another third period in which the Rangers got outscored. And we'll dive into some of the details of this game in just a little bit, mainly their third period woes. And then also a little bit later in today's episode, going to talk about some things that we got to see from the Rangers in the preseason finale against the Bruins. But for right now, I wanted to kick everything off with something that actually happened before the game yesterday, and that would, of course, be what we mentioned just a second ago during the intro, the idea of pairing Adam Fox with Urho Vaakanainen. Now, nothing is set in stone right now. It's still the preseason for another couple of days, but then the regular season's going to be here. This could just be preseason shenanigans if I'm going to go ahead and kind of play devil's advocate for a minute here and back the Rangers on the reasons why they might have Adam Fox with Urho Vaakanainen. That could be part of it. It could also be that, you know, they realize that at one time or another, there's 82 games in this upcoming season, and you don't know who's going to be available and who's not, injuries and what have you, or just the need to shuffle the deck. So maybe the idea here, as far as like scrambling the pairings, is to get guys a little bit of run playing with defense partners who they would not typically play with. Obviously, Adam Fox and Urho Vaakanainen would seemingly be, a very shining example of that. You also had Gavrikov with Schneider, which I assume would be the second pairing at practice. And then the third pairing was Susie with Borgen, and the fourth pairing was Robertson with Morrow. And those are, in fact, the final 8 defensemen that are in New York Rangers camp. The last 3 defense pairings that I mentioned there, they actually ended up skating together in this preseason game last night. But again, the one that I think really grabs your attention there, and there's certainly some noteworthy pairings there, but I think the one that really gets your attention, again, is Fox and Vaakanainen. And I did mention it could just be preseason shenanigans. That is true. And I guess, again, if I'm going to play devil's advocate and try to see the reasons why the Rangers, could consider this or might consider this, it would also allow you to split up what I think most of us would consider to be the Rangers' top 2 defensemen, that being Adam Fox and Vladislav Gavrikov. You can just kind of have Fox out there with anybody, I guess would be the idea here. But I'm not really on board with that plan, because I thought the entire idea of bringing over Gavrikov was to give Adam Fox the best defense partner that he's ever had, and also fill a massive void, because, of course, the Rangers, 3 of their top 4 defensemen for basically the past half decade, they're all gone now. They're all playing elsewhere. And so that being the case, you got to restock everything. And when you bring in a Vladislav Gavrikov and you give him the kind of contract and the length of the contract that you give him, I think you want to commit to him as the top pair defenseman. And for me, you look at Adam Fox, and he, like a lot of Rangers, is coming off of what I think a lot of us would call a down season. Now, again, there's a lot of defensemen around this league that would love to have the kind of season that Adam Fox had this past year. But by Fox's own lofty standards, it's certainly a little bit of a down year. And so, to me, you try to boost him by bringing in, the big free agent signing that you got here, the guy that's kind of just a very steady, consistent, well-rounded defenseman, and you give Adam Fox the best partner that he's ever had. For a while there, obviously, pretty much ever since they both came into the league, it was Adam Fox with Ryan Lindgren. That was the Rangers' top pairing. And I do think Lindgren, and the everydayers know this, I was always a fan of his while he was here. Just love the heart and hustle that he played with, one of those heart and soul kind of players. Things did kind of fall apart in that last season there. But I do think Lindgren is probably destined to go down as one of the more underappreciated, maybe even underrated Rangers of this, recent era here. But, facts are facts. He's gone. And I do think, I would say, and I think most of you would probably agree, that Gavrikov is an upgrade. He's just a better all-around defenseman than Lindgren. He's obviously got bigger size. He's, physicality is somewhat comparable. Lindgren, I mean, he's out there throwing the body despite not being the biggest defenseman in the league. Gavrikov will give you some hard hitting and some physicality as well. Gavrikov to me is the guy that's going to have better positioning out there. He's a more mobile skater. He can move the puck a little bit better, get a little bit more offense from Gavrikov as opposed to Lindgren as well. Just somebody that I think game to game is a more steady, consistent, all-around defenseman. So for that reason, I want him with Adam Fox. I don't want the Rangers to have Adam Fox downgrade from Ryan Lindgren to Urho Vaakanainen as opposed to upgrading from Ryan Lindgren to Vladislav Gavrikov. I just don't think that would really make any sense. I mean, again, the one case you can make for it is to spread the wealth a little bit. But for me, get your top two guys out there and give them big time minutes and lean on them in all the big spots in the game. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. And I realize, you can kind of mix and match later in the game. Like if you start Fox with Vaakanainen, but then you're getting into the third period and there's less than 10 minutes to go and you've got a 1-goal lead. Yeah, you can go to Fox and Gavrikov at that point, but why do it that way at all? Why not just have Fox and Gavrikov out there together for the entire game? That would get them both, obviously, top pairing minutes, and I think that's what you want. They are your best two defensemen after all. I've got nothing against Vaakanainen. I don't have any issues with him being a number 6 or number 7 defenseman on this team. I think he's okay in that role, but I'm not looking for him to get top pair minutes, and I'm not looking for Adam Fox to be handcuffed to Vaakanainen before or rather at the start of this season. Now, again, entirely possible. They're just messing around here. They're experimenting with some things, but I'd be lying if I said that my eyebrows did not, go up a little bit when I saw that those two were paired together at practice. There's a couple other things that I can mention here as far as reasons against it and maybe even reasons for it as well. I will say the pairings that we saw in practice and in most cases in the game as well, the only pairing that wasn't together in the game was obviously Fox and Vaakanainen. But having Gavrikov and Schneider together is kind of interesting because that gets Schneider into the top 4, which I think some of us are looking for. I know Larry Brooks just had like a whole article on it. I do think Schneider, it's gotten to the point where he should be a top 4 on this team. That gets him into the top 4 without having to have him switch sides. So that is an option. And then, Borgen and Susie, that's your third pairing. It also gets Susie out of the top 4. But what I would do, and this might be a little bit controversial, I don't know how people are going to feel about this, but I like the idea of, again, Gavrikov and Fox. And as a way to get your best 4 defensemen into the top 4, you move Schneider to the left side and you put him with Borgen. And I realize that's not a perfect solution. In a perfect world, Schneider would be lefty, and then that would just solve everything. But I do think that could work. Schneider has shown himself to be a very versatile defenseman, a whole bunch of different defense partners ever since he's made his NHL debut. And there have been times, it hasn't happened often, but there's been a couple of times at least where Schneider has lined up on the left side, and I don't think it's really hurt him, at least not all that noticeably. So food for thought there. But the one thing that I'm not really feeling at all is obviously, as I've made very clear at this point, putting Urho Vaakanainen with Adam Fox. Now, do I think they'll do that on opening night? I don't, but I wouldn't rule anything out either. I mean, there is kind of a new sheriff in town with Mike Sullivan being the head coach, and maybe his idea is to spread the wealth around a little bit and do break up Fox and Gavrikov before they even get a chance together. But I, for one, and you guys can let me know how you feel, am not feeling such a move, putting Urho Vaakanainen with Adam Fox. So in just a second, we're going to keep everything rolling. We're going to get into this game a little bit, the 3-1 loss to the Devils, and we are going to talk about what in the world is going on in the third period with the New York Rangers and why it needs to be fixed and how it can be fixed and what we saw in this game and all that good stuff. We'll be talking about that in just a second. All right, so keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Big shout out to the everydayers. As always, thank you guys so much for obviously supporting this podcast through thick and thin. And in our next episode, we're going to be breaking down whatever happens between the Rangers and the Bruins. They play each other at 2 p.m. on Saturday. That episode probably will not drop until Monday. Going to be away this weekend, but we'll jump right onto that as soon as I get back. And then Sunday night, we've got our fantasy draft. Very much looking forward to that as well. It's always a good time. So might even live stream that. We'll see. We've done that in previous years, so might do it again this year. But for right now, again, let's keep the focus on the Rangers and this game, and specifically the third period issues that they continue to have throughout now almost the entirety of the preseason. It's 5 games down and 1 to go. And the Rangers right now, where things stand, they have been outscored 10-0 in the third period. You heard that correctly. The Rangers have been outscored in 5 games, preseason or not, 10-0. We can call it 9-0 if you want, because the Devils did get an empty netter in this game. But either way, obviously that's not good. And it shows that the Rangers are not at their best when they need to be at their best. And I know, yeah, it's the preseason. Yeah, there's AHL guys out there for both teams. Yeah, the Rangers have their 4th-string goalie in the game. Whatever the case might be, certainly there are some extenuating circumstances. But in the preseason, you're looking to find out who's going to make the team, what the line combos are going to be, what the defense pairings are going to be, and you want to establish good habits for the upcoming season. And right now, that's about as bad of a habit as you can have. Not being at your best, not being sharp, and in some cases, getting dominated in the third period. It's obviously not good. It's not ideal. And again, there's plenty of time to correct this. And if the Rangers come out and they hit the ground running, they get off to a great start this season, that's going to be awesome, first of all. But secondly, we won't even think about this ever again. But it is noticeable. I mean, you can't tell me right now that, like, if the Rangers have, I don't know, say like they're up like 3-2 going into the third period on opening night against Pittsburgh, right? Are you really going to feel good about that based on how this preseason has gone? Now, again, it is the regular season. All your normal guys are out there. You know, it's your A lineup. Igor will be in net. So obviously that always gives you, a good chance of hanging on to a lead late in games. And you got to figure the players will be a little bit more dialed in as well. But 10-0 outscored in the third period in 5 preseason games. You can't do that in the regular season. If the Rangers have these kinds of problems in the third period, they're not going to be a playoff team, much less even get anywhere near, a Stanley Cup or make any kind of a deep run or anything along those lines. But as far as like the specifics of the third period, I mean, it just felt like this game never really reached that extra gear, and that's kind of on both teams. Maybe there's a little bit of like preseason fatigue going on at this point. I do feel like 6 games, preseason games, is kind of a lot, and maybe these guys are just kind of bored with it. I mean, again, you want to establish good habits, but I also realize that these guys are human, and that this game, the 5th preseason game here, is not going to be Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. I do understand that. But yeah, I mean, either way, this is not a good habit that is formed by the Rangers. But as far as looking at the specifics from the third period, I mean, you got Braden Schneider taking a penalty early in the third. That led to the game-winning goal for the Devils, what turned out to be the game-winning goal. It wasn't like a horrible penalty. You got him with a high stick. I don't think it was on purpose, but as we know, you are responsible for your stick. And that being the case, they obviously hit Schneider with a 2-minute minor in that situation in the game. And just generally speaking, I felt like this was a game, again, it didn't hit that extra gear, and the Rangers were a little bit sloppy at times. Even during the penalty kill here, you had a situation where Morrow and Susie kind of left the front of the net open, and I realize you're down a man and you're compromised a little bit, but Morrow did something that I couldn't really quite figure out what he was looking to do here. The Devils have the puck. They're on the power play. This is the power play, of course, that led to the game-winning goal, and they're moving the puck around the perimeter, and Morrow all of a sudden, like, he's got good position. There's a Devil in front of the net, and, it looks like he's got him covered, or he's on him at least a little bit. And all of a sudden, he, like, breaks toward the corner to go cover the guy on the Devils that's in the corner. Like, he's not going to score from back there, dude. Like, if they pass that way, so be it. I think maybe what happened here was he was anticipating the pass and thought maybe he could jump it, intercept it, potentially clear it down the ice. But what he really did was just leave the front of the net wide open. The puck took a deflection on the way to the net, and then the Devils deflected it in front of the net, and they scored, and that made it 2-1. So obviously not a banner PK there for the New York Rangers. So unfortunate there. The Rangers, they muster only 5 shots on goal in the third period. And you got to keep in mind, this is a third period in which the Rangers trailed by a goal for nearly all of it. I mean, the Devils, when they scored, what was it, like 2 minutes into the third period, right? And then, there's an empty netter at the very end. But for the most part, the Rangers were chasing a goal in this third period. And it never felt like they really got that extra gear. They got that extra little, jump of energy or whatever you want to call it. It never felt like they were really all that close to scoring the equalizer. There were a couple of chances here and there. Will Cooley, he did swoop around behind the net on the rush and tried to score on a quick wraparound attempt, and he got denied there. He had a little bit of a chance there. There was a situation where, a couple of really nice passes here. Laba to Parsonen to Gabe Perreault. Perreault did kind of fumble the pass. If he would have been able to get the shot away there, he would have had a decent opportunity to score. Offense's own possession continued, and Parson had a little bit of a chance at a stuffing goal. The puck kind of popped into the air, and he was there in the crease and wasn't able to put it home. Probably the best chance, though, was with about 3 minutes to go. You had Trocheck and Lafreniere zipping into the offensive zone. Trocheck drew a couple of defenders toward him, and then he kind of like chipped the puck, a little bit of a saucer pass over some sticks and to the center of the ice to Lafreniere. Lafreniere's on the doorstep one-on-one with the goalie. I believe he went forehand, backhand, but he was denied point blank. That was the best opportunity that the Rangers had. And I will say it's at least nice to see the two of them kind of link up for a play like that, because we need that line. If it's those two and Panarin, we need that line to get back to what they were 2 seasons ago when they were one of the best lines in the NHL. That would be awesome. So it's nice to see them click for a really good scoring opportunity there. But yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, for the most part, there just wasn't a whole lot going on in this third period. And it did kind of intensify, I guess, with a couple of minutes left, because you had Trocheck and Siegenthaler getting matching minors. This was a little bit more than 2 minutes to go. And, on one hand, it's kind of unfortunate that Trocheck takes a penalty here because, you're down by a goal and you don't have Panarin in this game. You don't have JT Miller in this game. So it's like, okay, well, who's going to score for this team? Now we don't have Trocheck either, and then they had a really random bunch of players on the ice at the end of the game. But at the same time, and Dave Maloney pointed this out as well, what's Trocheck supposed to do? Take 10 cross-checks to the back of the head? Because that's basically what happened. Trocheck was behind the Devil's net. Siegenthaler's, ramming him with his stick and hitting him in the head and getting in his face. And, Trocheck eventually gave it back. That should have only been a penalty on Siegenthaler, in my very humble opinion. I mean, Trocheck did eventually whack him back, but, I mean, God, 90% of that was Siegenthaler, as opposed to Trocheck, being on the attack there. So that was unfortunate. You get matching minors there. And then you've got, really random bunch of players out there. You had Rempe out there with the net, with the goalie pulled and trying to get the equalizer. So you've got Rempe, you had Lafreniere, you had Mika, you had Morrow, and you had Cooley. And obviously on opening night, if you're in a situation like that or anywhere else during the season, you're going to see different players than that. I mean, Mika will be out there. I think, Lafreniere and Cooley are certainly candidates as well. But Fox is going to be out there instead of Morrow. And as much as I, like what Rempe has done this preseason, his mistake in this game that led to a goal notwithstanding, I don't think you're going to see him on the ice in a situation like that with the goalie pulled, at the end of a game with the Rangers trailing by a goal. But yeah, I don't know. To me, it was a game where the Rangers just never really found that extra gear. It just never really got going. And disappointing that they just didn't get a lot of opportunities when they were trailing by a goal for as long as they were in the third period. And even when they pulled Jonathan Quick out of the game, you get the brief 6-on-5 and then you get the matching minors. So now it's a 5-on-4. But yeah, at that point, there were no real scoring opportunities to think of. It wasn't long after the matching minors that the Devils scored the empty netter. And that was pretty much it. So disappointing third period. Overall, kind of a disappointing game, too. Just wish there would have been a little bit more fire, a little bit more intensity. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping for, for the preseason finale. There's a little more fire. There's a little bit more intensity for that game, because that's basically the dress rehearsal. The one thing I'll say about all the Rangers issues, whether it's not closing in the third period, not being able to score a goal in the third period, any shortcomings that they've had, the fact that, I think they're now, what are they, 2-1, I believe, this preseason. So for all intents and purposes, 2 wins and 3 losses. It is just the preseason. So all it takes is the Rangers to flip the switch, get it rolling, hit the ground running this upcoming season, and we forget about all this just as quickly as it happened. But for right now, yeah, this third period implosion that we're seeing from this team, this wasn't as bad as some other ones, but these third period woes, they got to fix this. And it begins for me as soon as the next preseason game against the Bruins. I said earlier, it begins with this game. That obviously didn't happen. So we got one more shot at it before we're back in the regular season. The Rangers are doing the real thing. But yeah, so in just a second, going to keep everything rolling. Want to touch on some things that the Rangers need to do in the preseason finale. I already kind of mentioned one of them, but there's a couple more, and we'll get into all that in just a second. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers by talking a little bit about some of the things that the Rangers really need to do better. I think this is basically just a very casual wish list of things that I would like to see from the Rangers in the preseason finale, which again is slated for Saturday at 2 p.m. in Boston. And I understand again that it's the preseason. The veterans are probably tired of this. They probably want the regular season to start. There's games that actually have some meaning. But still, you're gearing up for the start of the regular season. This preseason game against Boston is only 3 days before the regular season opener against Pittsburgh. So you got to be ready to roll here. The first thing I want to see is the regulars. And different teams do it different ways, but I feel like in the past, the Rangers have mostly, when it comes to the final preseason game, have gone with most of their regular guys. There might be like 1 or 2 AHLers, maybe somebody that hasn't played enough games or somebody that was dealing with an injury or what have you, that end up playing in this final game. And so I'm just ready to see the regular guys out there for this last game, and that includes 3 players that either have not played in the preseason or have played very sparingly. That includes Artemi Panarin, JT Miller, and Braden Schneider. Within reason, if they're still dealing with injuries that are serious or even semi-serious, then I understand holding them out at least a little bit, but it would be nice to see these guys. We'll start with Schneider. I don't think it's quite as critical that he plays in this game. I know the Rangers' plan coming into the preseason was that he was going to play in 3 of the 6 games, or excuse me, he was not going to play in any of the first 3 games, and then he was going to play in 2 of the final 3. And he's now done that. Now, I assume when they said that he'd end up playing in the 4th and 6th games to kind of get him ready to go at the very end, but he's playing the 4th and the 5th. I wouldn't mind seeing him out there one more time in the 6th game, though. He's been a little bit up and down the first 2 preseason games. He's a little bit behind the 8 ball, given the fact that he had shoulder surgery, has to work his way back from it. So wouldn't mind seeing Schneider in the last game. Also, Panarin. I mean, obviously, he suffered an injury in practice. And like I was saying the other day, man, just fingers crossed that we can get through the end of the preseason, get through the end of training camp, and obviously just get there healthy and have everybody ready to go for opening night. But with Panarin, obviously he hasn't played any of these preseason games, and I know he's a superstar player and he's led the Rangers in points ever since he's been here every single season, and I get all that. But I don't think anybody's above a couple of preseason reps. And obviously, I mean, I'm sure if Panarin could play, he would. If it was up to him, I'm sure he'd be out there. And my hope again is that the injury doesn't keep him out of the preseason finale for a couple of reasons. If he plays in the preseason finale, I think we'll all kind of exhale a little bit because we know that they're not going to force him into a preseason game that, for the most part, is meaningless unless they're sure that he's ready to go for that game and also for opening night. If he doesn't play in the preseason finale, I think we all start wondering about what the deal really is here and if he's going to be good to go even when opening night rolls around, which is only 3 days after the preseason finale, as we mentioned earlier. And then JT Miller, I mean, we've barely seen him either. Obviously, the new Ranger captain, you want him to be out there. You want him setting a tone in this final preseason game before the games actually start counting. And, he was hurt in practice, non-contact injury. Those can always be a little bit scary. My understanding is that he was considered day-to-day almost immediately after that. So it doesn't sound like it's anything too serious. But again, I think you want to get him a few more reps. You want to get him into this game against Boston, and you want to make sure that he's ready to go for opening night, if possible. Now, again, if putting him out there in this preseason game would cause a risk for even further injury or, whatever the situation might be, he's just not ready to go yet, then I understand holding him out. But in a perfect world, for me at least, we get everybody out there, and that does include JT Miller. I already mentioned the third period. We don't have to go into too many details about that again, but got to see a better third period for the New York Rangers. And honestly, I want to see a little bit more rough stuff from the New York Rangers in this preseason finale. This game against the Devils, I mean, there were moments where the intensity picked up a little bit, and certainly, that whole exchange between Siegenthaler and Trocheck at the end of the game, that would certainly qualify, but I don't know. It just never felt like it ever really found that extra gear there. The intensity, the fire never really picked up. I'd like to see that against the Bruins, and I know you want everybody to get through this game healthy. I understand that. I know it's still the preseason, and et cetera, but this is still Rangers Bruins here. This is still New York and Boston. It's still a rivalry in every sense of the term. We've heard about how the Rangers, they want to play with some FU this year. We've heard about the slogan of no BS. There's a lot of bad language coming out of the Ranger locker room, but that's all good. You got to go out there and deliver, though. You got to go out there and bring the fight to the Boston Bruins. Again, it's the preseason. I get that. But keep in mind this as well. The Rangers, the last time they played the Bruins, were basically embarrassed. I mean, whether the game counts or not, you had a situation where you had a 3-goal lead in the third period. And yeah, Talon Boyko was in net, but the Rangers had a 3-goal lead in this game with less than 13 minutes to go. They allowed the Bruins to come back and tie it and then win it in the overtime period. And that's obviously, not good. I think that leaves a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth. I realize the rosters are going to be quite a bit different because that game against the Bruins, the Rangers had a lot of their prospects, a lot of the AHL bound guys in that lineup. But even with that being the case, I think you still want to get back on the horse, so to speak, and you want to get out there and get the job done and get right back in the Bruins' face. I think this would be good pride for both teams if the intensity picks up a little bit because, again, opening night is right around the corner, and let's just see a little bit of fire from this team, a little bit more energy than we saw in this game against the Devils. And one more thing that I want to see in the final preseason game against the Bruins, give me Noah Laba centering the third line. You guys didn't really think that we were going to go through this entire episode without mentioning Noah Laba, right? He's played in all 5 preseason games. He's looked great. And for my money, still the best option to open up this season as the third line center. We'll see if the Rangers feel the same way or not. You can make a case either way. But I do feel like he's given this team a little bit of a spark. I do feel like the Rangers are taking him seriously. They've had him out there in all 5 preseason games. And if he's out there for the 6th preseason game, which, again, generally speaking for the Rangers, I don't know how they're going to approach it this year, but generally speaking for the Rangers, that final preseason game has been kind of a dress rehearsal. So I think if we see Noah Laba out there starting the third line, it could give us an indication that, yeah, he's under serious consideration to be out there on opening night, or maybe he's even already earned his spot and he's already clinched that spot. Now, do I think that's what's going to happen? No. I wouldn't be shocked if the Rangers have Laba in this game, but just the lay of the land and the fact that, Parsons done okay in the preseason and they don't want to waive anybody and all that good stuff. I think there's a decent chance Laba's only played 11 AHL games that they're going to take the safe route and they're going to send Laba to the AHL at the very end. He'll probably be in the final round of cuts, but Parson will probably end up as the third line center. I will say this, though. I present the Rangers with a little bit of a compromise, right? Because the other day, we were talking about how the Rangers can have 14 forwards on the NHL roster and include Laba in that, and they would not have to waive anybody. And you could even sign Connor Sheary from his PTO. You would not have to let go of any of the veterans. That can't happen. So if you don't have Laba on the opening night roster, then I gotta at least alternatively have either Gabe Perreault or Brett Berard out there as well. To me, Laba makes more sense. I just think he's been awesome in the preseason. And again, you do have that hole at third line center. But if not Laba, there's still an open spot. I mean, you might as well throw one of the 2 young wingers out there. It's not going to be Othman. He already got sent down. So that leaves you basically with Gabe Perreault or Brett Berard. And strange though it may sound, I think I'm leaning a little bit toward Berard because obviously he was with the Rangers a lot longer last year. He feels like he's, maybe a little bit more NHL ready than Perreault, although Perreault's done very well. And as much as I prefer the idea of Perreault getting some reps in the AHL, which he's never done before, you can talk me into Gabe Perreault being on that opening night roster. I'm at least open to the idea, still kind of holding firm on sending him to the AHL first. We'll see what the Rangers look to do, but obviously some very interesting decisions coming in the next couple of days for the New York Rangers. But we'll call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchick17. Once again, @jchik17. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.